Hello, my dear friends. In a few days, 2 weeks, we're going to celebrate the Yontif of Pesach. Pesach deals with Abdus. It deals with slavery. Now, we, Baruch Hashem, are not avadim. We're not slaves. We live in a free country. But there's two meanings to the word Eved, or two dimensions to Abdus. The one dimension is that a person is subjugated to the whims of the master. But there's another meaning of Abdus, or another dimension of Abdus, that's relevant to all of us even today. In this week's Parsha, the Chumash transitions from the word avoda to the word malacha. The Chumash says that the Jewish people, when they built the Mishkan, they did kol havoda. They did all the work. And then it says in the next pasuk, Vayar Moshe kol malacha. Moshe saw that they did the malacha. What's the difference between malacha and avoda? They both mean to work. So what's the difference between them? And why does the Torah change the verb or the noun? So I think the difference is avoda means effort, which does not necessarily have any purpose or value. It means to perform a task. Malacha means to do something that has purpose and value. Where's the basis to make that distinction? So the word avoda comes from Eved, and Eved is a slave. A slave has to do whatever the master tells him. It doesn't make a difference whether it has value or no value, whether it makes sense to the Eved or not. The master says, do it, the slave has to do it. That's avoda. Avoda does not have a purpose. Avoda is, you have to do it because you're told to do it, and you have no choice in doing it. That's avoda. Malacha, Risham Shulchan Aruch says the malacha comes from the word malach. It's the feminine form of malach. A malach is an angel, but angels don't float around the world just to have a good time. Angels always have a task and a mission. God sends angels on missions. An angel is always sent to accomplish something, and therefore malacha means an activity that has an end goal, an activity that has a purpose. So the Chumash was saying that the Jewish people did the avodah. They worked very hard to build the Mishkan. It was a major effort. But when Moshe looked at it, he recognized that it wasn't just dry or monotonous work that they did, but it was malacha. It had an enormous value and enormous purpose. We are constantly in our lives busy doing things. But the big question is, are we doing malacha or are we doing avodah? Are we toiling monotonously and doing the same thing over and over again, but we're accomplishing nothing, which is avoda? Or are we engaged in malacha, in accomplishment that has value? And that should be a haunting question, because we're just busy our whole lives doing things. Which one are we doing? Are we doing malacha or are we doing avoda? And it makes an enormous difference. They tell the story of a man who was who was sentenced to 25 years of hard labor in prison, and he was assigned the task of turning this huge wheel that was very heavy, and the wheel was connected to an axle, and the axle went through the wall of the prison, and the person assumed that on the other side the axle is turning something, and he had no idea what it was. But as he toiled the 25 years, he was able to deal with the difficulty of turning that wheel, because he thought probably he's doing something of value. Maybe on the other side he's helping turn a windmill, or maybe he's helping a plow till the ground, or whatever it was. He thought he must be doing. Why else would they have him do such monotonous, crazy work? It must be that there's something happening on the other side. At the end of the 25 years, the first thing that he did when he was let out to freedom is he jumped over the wall, and to see what was he doing for 25 years. What was he turning? He jumped over the wall, and guess what? He saw that the axle was not connected to anything. And that was so unbelievably devastating to that person, because he saw that he invested 25 years of his life doing nothing. That is avdus in the extreme. The Torah says when you have an Eved, lo sirda bo befarach, you're not allowed to oppress the Eved. And Rashi says, what does it mean, befarach? Rashi says, if you have a slave do something that has zero value, that's befarach. That's devastating labor. So, for example, if you tell a person to dig a hole, you can go out into the field and dig a hole, and then take the dirt and put it back in the hole. So there's zero accomplishment. A person feels it's absolutely of zero value. That's avodah b'farach. When the Jewish people were in Mitzrayim, the Torah says, "Vayavidu osam b'farach." The Egyptians worked them b'farach, and which means in a backbreaking way. How so? Because they built Pisum and Ramses. Pisum and Ramses were pyramids that were structures that Chazal say it means that as soon as they built them, they were swallowed up. The sand was not firm, and they collapsed into the sand. It was like quicksand. That's Befarach, to build a pyramid, and it has no lasting value. You build it, and then it disappears, and you build it over again, and it disappears again. That's Avodah Befarach. So the haunting question that we should be thinking about, and I'm sure subconsciously we do, but sometimes we don't allow it to come to the level of our awareness, is all the things that we do in life. We're so busy. All of us are busy. Modern life especially. We're always running here, running there. Are we doing malacha? Is it something of value? And value is measured by longevity. Does it have any lasting value? Or are we just doing avoda? We're just toiling and working hard and doing things, but we're accomplishing absolutely nothing. And it's something that it's so important that a person should consider, what is it that I'm doing? I'm spending my whole life. What am I doing? I go to work every day. I take the train in, and I sit at a desk, and I'm pushing papers, and I'm writing, and I'm typing, and I'm on the computer, and I'm whatever else the things that we do in our life. Is it malacha or is it avoda? Does it have any value, or is it just a monotonous routine? David Thoreau, the famous author, said, "The mass of men," famous quote, "the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." Most people, they suffer in desperation quietly. They don't even realize that they're in a state of quiet desperation. They go through the monotony of life, and then in the end, they have very little to show for themselves. And it's possible even in religious life. A person could spend his whole life, you go to shul and you daven 3 times a day, and you spend, let's say, an average of an hour and a half in shul every day, and on Shabbos you spend 2 or 3 hours in shul, and you go to shiurim, and you do this, you do that, and you do all the mitzvos. But the question is it meaningful? Does it have a value? Does it accomplish something? Or is it malacha? Or is it just the drudgery of avoda? I was reading recently about there's a new group of billionaires. It used to be that the wealthiest people had $5 billion, $10 billion. Now it's an astronomical number. Jeff Bezos, who's the wealthiest man in the world, he has $182 billion. So, people, I think almost everybody in the world is jealous of it. I wish people would think, I wish I was like Jeff Bezos. Well, let me ask you, how did he earn the $182 billion? He earned it by working hard. He invested, he strategized. He spent his whole life making $182 billion. So let me ask you, is that malacha or is that avoda? What value does he have from $182 billion? What does he gain if he would have $1 billion? Is there any additional value to having the extra $181 billion? What more does he have out of life by having $181 billion than $1 billion or even $100 million? So if there is no difference, and there isn't, because what could a person do with $182 billion? It's impossible to spend $182 billion. So when he's going to come up to Shemayim, I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe he gave some tzedakah, maybe he helped people out, but he's going to come up after he leaves this world, and God's going to say, so, okay, you made $182 billion. What did you do with it? What did you accomplish? What was the achievement? And if he didn't use the money in a purposeful way, then all it was the same as being an Eved and working befarach, doing monotonous, imbecilic work. So he worked hard to make. So he got kavod in his lifetime. He was in the in the Guinness Book of Records, the wealthiest person in the world. But what does he have from that? What does he have from having the billions of dollars? And everybody wants to be rich, and people devote their lives. They work so hard for the company, and they want to climb up the ladder and get raises and bonuses and be successful. But what does success mean? Success is not simply to have a title on a plaque on your door that you're the vice president or the president of the company. Success means to accomplish something of lasting value. And even in religious life, as I said before, we could go through the motions of doing things over and over again, and we don't really accomplish anything of lasting value. Value is, we say in davening, God created us in order to honor Him. God gave us a Torah that is true. And He implanted in us everlasting life, eternity. He gave us an opportunity to be involved in eternity. He should open our hearts to the Torah. We should love and fear HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why? In order that we should not toil in vain, and we should not give birth to emptiness. That's the biggest curse. What does it mean, nobody's working for naught. Nobody's just running around in a circle doing nothing. But if there's no ultimate value, if the person is working so he could have food to eat, and he has food to eat so he could be alive, and he's alive so he could work, and it's just a vicious cycle of working and working and working, but there's no ultimate goal. There's no value. The avdus never rises to the level of malacha. So then it's ligalarik. It's working in vain. It is zero accomplishment, and that is the biggest curse. But the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us a Torah which allows us to infuse meaning into every single dimension of life. The amazing thing about Torah is that everything that a Jew does has meaning. You put on your shoes in the morning. You're supposed to put on your right shoe first, then your left shoe, and tie the left shoe, and then tie the right shoe. And there's all sorts of symbolic meaning and mystical meanings. There's different layers of depth to understanding with the significance. You're putting on your shoes. Everybody has to put on shoes. But the Torah life allows a person to take the most mundane aspect of life and elevate it, that it has a value, either a value in terms of forming a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or a value in terms of refining our own character, which is one of the greatest goals of life, or value in terms of Bein Adam L'Chareo, in terms of how we affect other people. If a person wakes up in the morning and he brings joy into people's lives, and he welcomes people, and he smiles at them, and he compliments them, and he helps people out, that's malacha. But if a person just goes through life and he's busy at his pencil pusher doing his job, that's life of quiet desperation, no achievement, just doing the same thing over and over again. And then at the end of a person's life, a person will look back and say, "Hey, what did I accomplish in my life? What is it that I did?" I have noticed many times. I visit plants that are under OU supervision, and I meet with people in management positions, and sometimes I talk to people who are working on the production line. I have seen an enormous sense of pride that the people have that they're OU certified. What do they care? They're not Jewish. They don't eat kosher food. Why does it matter to them that the food is kosher? And the answer is because they appreciate the fact that they're doing a favor for somebody. So it elevates their work. They're not just standing on a cookie line, pushing buttons their whole lives over and over again, the monotonous drudgery of making cookies, millions, 10 million, 100 million, the trillion cookies over and over again. They're helping people by making it kosher. It means that enabling people, they understand that. that enabling people to be able to have benefit from what you're doing, that's enormous value. That's malacha. That's not avoda, because there's a purpose. And the Torah allows us in every single dimension of our lives that it should not be simply acts of avoda, and it shouldn't be avodas perach, where extreme and exhausting work that has zero value, but that everything that we do, every single thing is infused with enormous value and purpose in Jewish life, and that is the greatest bracha that a person can have. And so as we celebrate the Yontif of Pesach, which is Zman Cherusenu, let's think about Cherusenu not only in terms of not having a master, a taskmaster, but also Zman Cherusenu in terms of being liberated in the sense that we're not engaged in avoda. We're not avodim. We're not doing monotonous drudgery. We're not people of quiet desperation. We're doing malacha. We're doing things of great importance. And on Shabbos, the prohibition is to do malach. There's 39 malachas, not 39 avodas, because on Shabbos what's prohibited is doing something in nature that has creative value. That's a malacha, and we derive the 39 malachas from Shabbos from the 39 different activities that were involved in the building of the Mishkan, because that was malacha. When they built the Mishkan, it wasn't avoda, it was malacha. It had value. So as we celebrate the Yontif of Pesach and we think about the meaning of Cheres, of freedom, and the good fortune that we have, that we're no longer avadim and that we're people who are free. If we really want to have a taste of freedom and understand what it means to be b'nei Choram, let's think about our lives. Let's think about how we spend our time. Is it meaningful and value? And if we're not engaged in avoda, but we're engaged in malacha, and if we when we do an accounting, we see, most of the time in my life is spent in avoda. So let's change it. You don't have to be this. The person doesn't have to go through life the same way forever. Let's change our lives. Let's elevate everything that we do. A person's sleep could be malacha. A person's eating is malacha. Because if you're doing it in order to have strength and the ability to accomplish things, to help people, to move, to be of assistance, to move closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to refine your character, that's malacha. So let's make sure that we are engaged in our lives in malacha and not avoda. And if that's the case, then we will really appreciate and understand what it means to be b'nei Chorim.